Welcome to Strip Cover Lit. I'm Adrian Fort.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And we are here with our review of On the Road. Dalton, kick it off.
Well, On the Road.
Yeah.
It's not...
Well, no, I think that...
what you're missing, it's just...
Look, I didn't really... I understood. I don't know if I felt...
This is my Dogs of Babel.
Welcome to Strip Cover Lit. I'm Adrian Fort.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And we are here with you for this week's book review. Dalton, what are we hitting this week?
This is something I've always wanted to read. And I've tried many times. And I've failed. So we tried to read it for the channel and we failed. And we kept on trying. And finally, On the Road, Jack Kerouac.
Yeah.
Are we done? Can we just stop the video now, please? This was not what I wanted.
No, absolutely not. We'll get into that. Where do you want to start?
Good things and bad things. There's always good, there's always bad, no matter how bad this actually was. So what's good about this? What can we say?
This is indelibly a slice of Americana. Number one. Number two, this is an extremely quotable book.
Yes.
Number three, there are nooks and crannies of this thing that are extremely intriguing. The bum life, Old Bull Lee, the frenetic energy of Dean, and the small places between big places.
It's that romantic idea.
Yeah.
That's what this entire thing is. There are examples of beautiful writing coupled throughout this piece. I think you said that along with good little quotes, very quotable. Beautiful writing, occasionally. This is the defining example of a generation. I mean, this is the Beat generation. This is what that time period was. Again, this is a slice of Americana. There are beautiful parallels between Sal's journey on the road and Dean's inner journey here. They're both going through the same thing in their own way. So there are some wonderful parallels, in my opinion. The bad things. Only three, please.
This is what happens when someone falls in love with the idea of writing the great American novel. You sit down to write America, the novel.
Okay.
I can name about 20 characters from this thing, but when I'm not looking at them, I really only know three of them. Dean, Sal, and Old Bull Lee.
Yeah.
The third, may I?
Please do.
This is the book that never ends. It just goes on and on, my friends. Strip cover, started reading it, not knowing what it was. And we'll continue reading it forever just because this is the book that never ends. It just goes on and on, my friends. Strip cover, started reading it, not knowing what it was. And we'll continue reading it forever just because.
That's how this week was for me. And I told you about this. I got to plug this in real quick. I did everything that I could to avoid finishing this book. I cleaned my house. I started considering going to coffee shops to write, which I never do. Anything to not have to read this.
You projected next year's taxes?
I solved world hunger.
And then I lost it?
And then I lost it because I had to sit down and read this. It just melted out. This is the reason you should never write a book in a week. We all know the legend of the scroll and how he sat down and wrote this.
Tell that for a second,
okay,
for anyone who doesn't.
Allegedly, and they have this, it travels, it's an exhibit, Kerouac sat down and just started going on his typewriter. Started going and didn't stop. The pages were taped together.
Apparently he realized that the part that was taking the longest was changing the papers out of his typewriter. Yeah. So what he did was he loaded that next page, taped a page to that page, taped a page to that page.
I imagine would take more time, but I think it's like 120 feet.
Something like that,
He wrote a scroll where he just rambled on the road.
And he should have dropped it in the Dead Sea.
And I sincerely imagine that he said, all right, it's done, let's publish it. That's what it was. Nothing happens in this entire story. There is no plot. There is no change in character.
I won't say nothing happens. I would, if I could disagree with you slightly. Things happen, nothing moves.
Okay.
The difference, Hemingway often preached the difference between action and movement.
There's a lot of action here.
There's a lot of movement. There's not a lot of action.
Okay. There are 5 parts to this novel. They are all the same story. Easy as that. If this would have been a short story with 1 part, it would have been palatable. I could have took it in. But when you finish 1 part, it literally begins with, and then I got the itch again.
Right.
And then I did the same things, and I'm going to tell you about them again.
And part of me wonders, not to get into this part of the review yet, but part of me wonders if that is a drug reference, right?
It could be.
You keep falling into the same life. Quotes. You have them?
I do have a couple, and I mean, here's just one that I have. It's a good example of beautiful writing. It's very good imagery. And here, for the first time in my life, I saw the beloved Mississippi River. Dry in the summer haze, low water, with its big rank smell that smells like the raw body of America itself because it washes it up.
It's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. I have one more. This is from Chapter 12, Part 1. This is the first time in this novel where I said, wow, there's some beauty in here. And I can't even... Terry. This is when he first meets Terry and they have their fling. Then 2 tired angels of some kind hung up forlornly in an LA shelf, having found the closest and most delicious thing in life together. We fell asleep and slept till late afternoon. After reading that, it was so soothing, it was so beautiful, and I was happy. And then he started talking again.
And you realized there's 200 pages after that.
Yes, yes.
Is that all your quotes?
That's all I'm going to use.
I've got 4. The first one on page 97.
Okay.
Isn't it true that you start your life a sweet child, believing in everything under your father's roof? Then comes the day of the Laodiceans, when you know you were wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked, and with the visage of a gruesome, grieving ghost, you go shuddering through the nightmare life. Second, I have from page 136, and this is a hell of a quote, but bear with me here. The ideal bar doesn't exist in America. An ideal bar is something that's gone beyond our kin. In 1910, a bar was a place where men went to meet during or after work, and all there was a long counter, brass rails, spittoons, player piano for music, a few mirrors, and barrels of whiskey at 10 cents a shot, together with barrels of beer at 5 cents a mug. Now all you get is chromium, drunken women, fags, hostile bartenders, anxious owners who hover around the door, worried about their leather seats and the law, just a lot of screaming at the wrong time, and deadly silence when a stranger walks in.
Wonder how Kerouac would feel walking into a bar today.
That's what it is, man.
There's truth in that. There is.
Here's a small quote that I think represents the entire novel.
Okay.
The road must eventually lead to the whole world. Ain't nowhere else it can go, right? But my favorite quote from the piece, which I'm considering getting tattooed.
Ooh.
Because this is gorgeous. This is the story of America. Everybody's doing what they think they're supposed to do.
It would be just your unfortunate pleasure to have a quote from this book tattooed on it. You're like, oh, is that On the Road? That's my favorite book. Just,
shut up.
So
that might be my favorite quote, though, like possibly of all time.
Now, see, I've always said, now I'm going to get off on a rant. I've always wanted a literary tattoo. I have a theater tattoo because that represented a very early part of my life. I don't have a literary tattoo. I've always wanted to get So It Goes right across my heart. So maybe if we get enough subscribers, I would consider that.
At 700 subscribers, Dalton will tattoo my face on his back.
Anyway.
Yeah, let's get into things. Where do you want to start?
I had a lot of trouble with this. This is hard to retain. And would you like to sum this up? You summed it up beautifully as the old drunkard. And I think that sums up this piece. Yeah,
Kerouac, it feels like this book is Kerouac as the drunk old man at the corner of the bar that you accidentally sit down next to. And he says, hey, let me tell you a story. Yeah. And he doesn't shut up.
Yeah.
And he just keeps going and it ruins your entire meal, right?
I was broken.
And by meal, I mean beer, because let's be honest.
It's wheat-ish. I was very disappointed with this. This is considered achievement of literature, one of the top 100 books that you have to read before you die. And I have always had some fascination with this, some reverence toward it, and it broke my heart.
Right.
Now, Was it what I wanted? Yes. This is the unachievable romantic idea that we will never have again. I can't just walk out of this apartment right now, get on the road and hitchhike with the money in my pocket and survive. This will never happen again.
Right. It reminds me, there's Wins, Losses, and Lessons by Lou Holtz, who used to be the football coach for Notre Dame. That's his memoir. And he's got a small bit in it where he talks about thumbing, which is what they used to call hitchhiking. And the whole time, that's all I could think about was, you don't do this anymore. It's illegal.
Yeah.
You cannot hitchhike.
And, I've told you about this a few times. I've been watching a documentary on the 60s, which has, it mentions Carlo Marx, Allen Ginsberg, quite a bit.
Yeah. But Carlo Marx is Allen Ginsberg, for someone who's not familiar with it.
This is an interesting novel where I want to say, I'm going to pronounce it incredibly wrong. It's a Romanaclef.
Okay.
But it basically, what it is it's creative nonfiction.
It's a fictionalization.
It's a fictionalization of actual events. Sal Paradise is Jack Kerouac.
Yeah.
Carlo Marx is Allen Ginsberg. So you do get a glimpse into the author's lifestyle at that time. You get a glimpse into their experiences, what led them to be the people that they are. But this documentary I was watching was talking about how picking up hitchhikers used to be no big deal. And I mean, that's the boys from, Nebraska, putting them in the back of the truck and, just barreling down the road, having a good time. That was no big deal. They said the defining characteristic of what stopped that was Charles Manson. Because after Charles Manson, you didn't pick up the scraggly hitchhiker.
Yeah.
That was the first fear that was set into America. Anymore, if I'm driving with a significant other and I see a hitchhiker, I will always vie to pick them up. I have an inherent trust in people that probably makes me a fool, which is a good part of this novel, if I may say. But that's always the response I get. There is not a chance in hell you're picking up that person.
Yeah.
Because they will kill us.
One thing interesting along those notes, we were talking about who these characters really are.
Yes.
Old Bull Lee, do you know who that was?
William Burroughs.
Yes. Do you know where William Burroughs was born?
No. Kansas City.
St. Louis.
St. Louis. He was Missouri, yes.
Yeah.
He spent his later years in Kansas City, I believe, though.
Did he? I didn't know that.
I'm 99% sure, yes.
So let's get into actually delving into this novel.
Okay.
This is apostolic, no?
I think so.
Is Sal or is Sal not Dean's apostle through this? He is learning life through Dean's eyes. He is recording it, and he is passing it on to future generations.
Okay.
So Dean Moriarty is Christ in this.
Okay.
Right? It is apostolic in that nature. Unfortunately, this does not become apparent until the last third of the book. For me, there's this scene, I can't remember what it is right now. It's about a third of the way left in the book, and Dean is saying something, and for the first time, Dean feels like the prick.
Okay.
Do you remember that turn late in the novel where Dean becomes just another one of them? Sal becomes just another one of them, because before that, Sal
was this preparing where Sal basically abandons Dean, and then comes the realization that he was just basically a rat? I think that's how he referred to him.
It's before that. I think it's the beginning of that journey.
Up to that,
it's the beginning of that journey where Sal, I wish I could remember it now. I didn't write it down because I was just trying to motor through this at that point. Because we've been trying to do this review for a month now.
When we started this channel in December of 2015,
yes,
this was one of the first books I said, I want to read this.
Yes.
Here it is, May of 2016, and we just got to it.
Yeah.
So.
But there is a point in the last third of this novel where Sal flips and becomes another Dean.
Yes.
And it would have been incredibly fruitful to know he was another dirtbag before that. Because before that, he's sort of a Nick Carraway-like protagonist in that he's not really a part of the story.
Yes, but
he's there, he partakes in things. There are parts where he's alone, but even in the parts where he's alone, he is journeying between people.
But if Dean Moriarty, if Dean was the speaker for the novel, would we see Dean as the prick?
Well, and I don't know.
I think that's what you're going to look at there. Now, you said that you see Sal as Dean's apostle.
Yes.
I read this and felt this was more of for lack of a better word, coming of age.
Yes.
This is the journey everyone must go through to find themselves, that sweet hippie ideal. You must find yourself. Because between Sal and Dean, they're both on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Their paths may cross, but Sal's journey is on the road. Dean's journey is an inner struggle. Dean is trying to find himself. Dean is trying to find himself through women. Dean is doing the same thing Sal is doing. He gets with a woman, and then he feels the itch, so he has to find someone else. It's the same thing.
And that's interesting because Sal has the inner struggle seemingly figured out, but he doesn't know the road.
Yes.
Dean knows the entire road.
Yes.
Does not know the inner self.
That's that beautiful parallel.
Wow, I had not. You do.
I get one.
Because after that point where we figure that out, that last third of the novel, what do? They go where neither of them knows. They go to Mexico.
Yes.
Right? Through a land that neither of them knows, is completely foreign to them.
And everything's wonderful.
They've never been.
Everything's cheap. Everything's beautiful. You do realize that we're Sal and Dean, right?
How do you mean?
I mean, you can pick whoever one you want to be, but we are Sal and Dean.
Explain.
We both are on some journey to do something.
Yes.
Whether it's writing, whether it's reading. And we only cross our paths when beautiful things happen. We crossed in college the literature degree. Now here we are, we're doing this channel. So I would like to imagine at some point, one of us is going to abandon the other. And later in life, one of us is going to be, working at a toll booth or something, just, living on the simple pleasures.
And we'll meet up again.
And it's going to be beauty again. That's what it felt like reading this. I'm like, God, Adrian, why are you doing this to me?
Speaking of that, along those lines, did you feel there were gay undertones? Now, hold on. Let me finish here. There is a point early in the novel where Sal goes to meet Dean at a hotel he's staying at, and he's staying with a woman, and he opens the door. Dean opens the door, lets Sal in, and the first thing Sal sees is a painting the woman has done of Dean, and the only thing about this painting that he notes is the quote-unquote enormous dangle. Right? Okay? So what does that say? 2, when Sal is in the back of the Minnesotans' truck, right? They were from Minnesota going through Nebraska. The guy's trying to pee off the back. And the guys in the truck, the Minnesotans, slam on the brakes. Boom! And the one thing he notes is everyone saw, what was it called? The whale spout. Okay? Now, also, there is a great deal of when they're together. Obviously, Dean's having a lot of sex.
Yes.
Dean's having a lot of sex. When they are together, Sal and Dean often talk about sex, but in the spirit of Catcher in the Rye, little sex is happening.
Okay.
Do you think there are gay undertones in this?
Absolutely.
Absolutely?
I don't think they are as defined as we would see them now. If you have to look at the generation this came from, this is the free love generation. The gay tones aren't gay tones, they're tones of love. That was that generation. It doesn't matter who you love. If you feel like you should love someone, you should love. So absolutely, it's happening there. And historically, if we look at characters like Karl Marx, Allen Ginsberg, it's obvious there were some homosexual things happening. But it's just that generation. I don't think it's an apparent point that there are homosexual tones in this. I think it's just part of this movement, of this free love and this journey to find yourself.
So you do or do not believe that there are homosexual energies at play?
I believe they're there, absolutely, but I don't think they're as defined as we would see them now.
Now, I want to note that that was my take at first as well.
Okay.
But what does it say about masculinity and the state of masculinity in today's world when, flip the roles, okay? You have a book written about 2 women who admire each other, who admire each other's bodies, who enjoy each other's company, and to whom men are disposable. We call that book empowering, not lesbian. right?
Fair enough.
So how sad is it that in today's world, we look at this through those shades and say, those two buddies, they spend an awful lot of time together. I bet there's some action going on the side, right? How sad is that?
Well, and we could get into an entire video series on gender roles. And things are changing in our society, but I don't know if they're changing for the better. Because if you do look at this again for the time period, this is the women's rights movement. It's coming. So there's
danger on the horizon.
There are huge contrasts between men and women at the time this novel was published. So I don't know if that is a reason that we get this and how the tones are kind of underplayed. But again, I think it's just more so, this is a novel of the human experience. The homosexual, heterosexual doesn't matter in this novel. It's just the experience to find who you are. And I may become Allen Ginsberg after this and start preaching the sweet hippie lifestyle.
Right, and I can agree with that. But on the surface, from today's viewpoint, which we're all prisoners of,
Yes.
does it feel like there are homosexual tensions?
I would say yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Since we're talking about times changing and different sentiments, one thing that seriously struck me in this was their attitudes towards high school girls.
Okay.
These are, I think, 30-ish-year-old men in this.
Yes.
I believe they're right around 30. There are several points where it's talked about cruising to pick up high school girls.
Yes.
In fact, there might be, I think there's one in the first, what are they called? Part one, what do they call them?
In part one, I remember there was something where I think I could agree with you on this, where they see high school men, high school boys, as competition.
Right.
And I'm trying to find it because I know I highlighted it.
And, okay, you got it?
Who did they think they were, yawing at somebody on the road just because they were little high school punks and their parents carved the roast beef on Sunday afternoons? Who did they think they were, making fun of a girl reduced to poor circumstances with a man who wanted to be loved?
Yeah. So, I believe in the third act, or part, there is there's a part where Dean is going to get a high school girl, right? And they get chased off while they're in Nebraska. I believe that's the third part. And in the fifth part, they go to Mexico, and there is this constant, steady, I won't call it a debate, but it is definitely a conversation about which girls are too young. Right?
Yes.
And so you have to be imagining that if high school girls are completely fine to these 30-year-old men, how old were those girls that might or might not be too young? And how has the attitude in today's society changed towards that?
Completely shifted.
Absolutely.
Completely shifted. But, again, this was a different time, and when you read something that has historical tones like that, it's just like looking at racism in Mark Twain.
Right.
That's the way the world was.
Right.
So that is an interesting point.
Right. But and here's the thing with Mark Twain. That's 130 years ago.
Yes.
This is 50 years ago.
Yes.
This was happening 50 years ago. It was absolutely within the realm of what's cool 40 years ago. So we're talking about the generation previous to my generation that decided, no, never mind. You can't. The 18. No, you know what I'm saying? So. Here's what we're looking at when we look at this. Men are not allowed to take pleasure in each other's company because then you're a faggot.
Okay.
Men are not allowed to prospect high school girls because then you're a predator.
Okay.
And when you really look at things, that age, like you're starting to see more and more in society, oh, she's 10 years younger than him. He's such a predator.
Okay.
Right? So there's this constant shifting of what men are allowed to do, and it becomes more and more towards the corner of the page.
Okay.
Right? So I think that there are a lot of, and don't get me wrong, I'm not defending cruising and picking up girls that are sophomores in high school.
Okay.
That's absolutely not what I'm talking
thing.
about. But I think that it's interesting to see what is constantly a shifting smaller available masculinity versus what is available as an acceptable form of femininity, just constantly moving, right? When you think about it, think about it. Lolita, which is now seen as risque, right? Versus Madame Bovary,
Okay.
which is seen as, hey man, it's women's rights.
Well,
right?
let me push this. We're moving into a time where, and it's always been a terrible stereotype that men were allowed to be promiscuous and sleep around, but women were not. And it's more acceptable now.
Absolutely.
But it's starting to go to the opposite spectrum, where a man who is sleeping around is seen as someone who uses and abuses women.
Yeah.
So we're flipping spectrums here completely.
Well, but not even then, because it's more abrasive than that. Because a woman who slept around was known as a whore.
Yes.
But there was still some shred of life that you were accepted into, right? However, a man that is a user and abuser, right? User and abuser. Just because you like women and you have consensual sex, how are you using and abusing? How are you still the bad guy in that situation?
The question which prompted the 60s.
Right, but it's absolutely there, right? So another thing I'd like to talk about is the difference between this. We recently read The Old Man and the Sea.
Okay.
Basically, these are the same stories. Someone goes out and comes back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what makes Jack Kerouac need to tell that same story 5 times? And another thing that I think we can get into here, the disposability of a lot of the words in here. So Hemingway takes one journey out and back.
Yes.
In The Old Man and the Sea.
And that's very Hemingway.
It's very Hemingway, and it is indisposable, right? Flip through your book. Find 20 pages and rip them out.
Oh, easily.
Is
Easily.
this the same book?
Yeah.
Now, The Old Man and the Sea, take a sentence and rip it out.
It's different.
It's a different book.
That is, in my opinion, that is Hemingway. That is a clean, cut and dry. The man's journey has a beginning, it has an end, and this is the experience he had. Whereas this is the Beat generation. There was no one experience. This is defining of these people. This is that meandering, that endless wandering to find oneself, to find the meaning of self. There is no answer. I think that's the way you got to look at this, is although they've had their journey, they didn't find the answer, and they never will. Because that defines that generation. And this is, again, I'm going to talk nothing about generation now. This is the generation that came after the 30s, the 40s. The Platonic family. The mother who stayed at home, she stayed in the kitchen. The father who worked to support the ideal prospect of the kids, who would do the same. This is the first rebellion that you get in American society. This is the first push away from that very conservative parental life to the complete opposite. So yeah, there's a lot of wandering. There is a lot of being lost here. This entire novel is wandering as lost.
Yeah.
Because there is no answer. There is no end of the road.
And I think when you bring up that previous generation, the 30s and the 40s, if I can hearken again to Lou Holtz's memoir, another thing he says in there is that was a generation to which the idea of disposable income was laughable.
Yes.
There was no such thing.
Yes.
This is a generation where even the bums had disposable income to blow on wine.
Yes, because they're changing their priority. This is going from the father who works all day, every day to support a family, and that's what we have. It's never going to get better. It's never going to get worse. This is it.
It is constant.
Yes.
There is a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes. To a generation where there is not a beginning, a middle, and end. It's that wandering generation where, yeah, I got some money. We might as well spend it on this experience. We might as well drink this money. We might as well smoke this money. Because it's just money.
We might as well inject this money.
It's just money, man.
And it's you keep bringing up, this is the novel that defined a generation. And that's even on the back
that's
of the
what
book.
it says. That's
right?
Yes.
And no wonder we're where we are today.
Again, I've got to harken. I'm so glad I happened to watch this. Kerouac was heralded as like a prophet. The man who just said it all. and he hated it.
Really?
Absolutely hated the fact that people were looking to him as the man who did this, to the point where he actually clashed against the Beat Generation because that's not what he wanted.
Well, and since we brought up Hemingway as well, one thing that strikes me is that Kerouac is the anti-Hemingway in many ways. What does Hemingway always write about? The glory days.
Yes.
He writes about the glory days, and he does it very succinctly. There's nothing succinct about this.
No, Kerouac writes everything else that happened.
Right. Did you know Kerouac played college football? I believe at LSU.
Nope.
Which was, I mean, playing football at the SEC level in this day and age, you would have been a king.
Yeah.
He never mentions that.
And you know, that's the thing. Having seen some interviews with Kerouac about this, he is a man's man. He looks gruff, he looks tough, he smokes cigarettes. This is a very romantic, dare I say, feminine piece.
Yeah, and see, there's a part in here where he talks about Dean racing past him as they were running down the road.
Okay.
And he says, I ran a 10-500, which is damn, I mean, that's, I think you're going to win, I think that would have won the state of Missouri last year. A 10-5 probably, somewhere in there, right? And he probably really did.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
He was an athlete.
And he looked to be in good shape. So I was flipping through earlier at the beginning trying to find this. Again, there's beautiful writing in here. Found another quote for you. We passed the bottle. The great blazing stars came out. The far receding sand hills got dim. I felt like an arrow that could shoot out all the way. There's gorgeous writing in here, but it's just an example. Hey, you can take all the gorgeous writing and all the beautiful quotes and all the beautiful true experiences, and it's still not there.
Right.
For me.
And like I said, take any 20 pages of this novel, rip it out, it's the same book. But in those 20 pages, there is gorgeous writing.
Absolutely. And I wholeheartedly expect we're going to get some heat for this one. I imagine this is a novel that somebody holds very near and very dear, and they don't want to hear us yelling about it.
And I'm sure that they are able to justify this in the way that we justify Hemingway.
I hope so.
I'm sure
I hope so. And I would love to hear some of that. I would love to hear your justification. Give us what we're missing here.
So I've got two things to talk about left.
Okay.
What is Dean on? That frenetic energy, what is he on? I think the implication is made that he's on cocaine, which makes sense, but where is he getting it? While they're thumbing across the nation. Because Dean, the guy represented in this novel, if he's got a pocket full of cocaine, he does not ration it, right? That's blown on the first night.
You know, again, I'm going to say this is a generational thing. Drugs are everywhere. All you got to do is step out your door. Somebody's going to share.
In Nebraska?
I think so.
In Nebraska.
This generation of people, I mean, look at Woodstock. People came from everywhere to a small farm in New York.
Where they knew there would be drugs.
People came from everywhere, though. Hundreds of thousands of people. There are movements that, you think of the movement in San Francisco, which was huge for the hippies. They were popping up everywhere. It's just San Francisco was the one you heard about.
Right, but in Nebraska?
I think so.
In Kansas?
Yeah. I think so.
I don't know. I think drugs are more available today than they were then.
I mean, look at your old Nebraska boys. Driving down the road, obviously blazed on whiskey.
Yeah, but that's whiskey.
This is just a different time.
That's not marijuana, that's not cocaine, that's not LSD, that's not heroin.
I think it's all one and the same in this.
Okay. I know a lot more of it would have been legal back then, right?
Absolutely.
I think that was before the great wave of illegalization.
Yep.
But I think marijuana was illegal since the 30s, if I'm not mistaken.
But it didn't come with such harsh penalties as it does.
Absolutely. The last thing I have to talk about, and I don't know if this struck you too, they're never really in Missouri. This is a personal point.
Okay.
Reading it as a Kansas Citian, as a Missourian, this is the great novel about crossing the country 16 times, and I kept wanting them
to go through Missouri.
To go through Kansas City. There's a brief moment where he mentions being in, I believe it's a bus in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And the next thing he mentions is Abilene, Kansas. You drove through Kansas City to get there.
And at this time, Kansas City would have been a mecca.
Right, and that's the thing, is there are several times where Kansas City is mentioned. There is This is a 5-part novel. I believe in 4 parts, there is someone coming to or going from Kansas City.
But they're never in Kansas.
But they're never in Kansas City. And I believe Kansas City is referenced in all 5 parts. The only one that it might not be referenced in off the top of my head is the first part. Did I just spit on you?
Not really, but...
Dean at one point is coming from Kansas City, I believe. Old Bull Lee, I believe, says he spent last year in Kansas City.
You're just pissed off because you want to go walk the same streets as Kerouac.
It would have given me something tangible to do from this novel, right? And this was a time when Kansas City was... It's even mentioned in here as the Paris of the Plains, I believe.
Yes.
That was what Kansas City was known as. Look, they're doing drugs. They're loving jazz music. They're indulging in food. Where would you have gotten those things?
Point.
Kansas City.
And Kansas City used to be the cultural business mecca
of the Midwest.
It was everything, the Paris of the Plains.
But they go over it, they go under it, they go way under it.
I like to imagine that Kansas City was so rowdy, Kerouac's like,
I gotta go past this.
Let's not write this part. Let's just keep going. Anyway.
Okay.
And I'm gonna probably get some heat. What would you rate this?
I'd give this a 65 out of 100.
65?
Yeah.
I was going to say 70. 70 dangles out of 100.
70 enormous dangles.
Enormous dangles. That's low.
Yeah. This is the lowest score I've given on this channel, I believe.
I think this disappointed me more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and there will be someone who unsubscribes because of this. There will be someone who will troll the comment section.
And that's the thing. I sincerely hope if you've watched this sprawling video, because we've said so much in this, if there is something that you found that made you love this, let us know.
Tell us we're wrong.
Maybe this is just because the people who said this is the top 100 you should read lived this.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we're missing, but this is not for me.
Yeah. What would you recommend?
I don't know. I would recommend The Road by Cormac McCarthy because those have similar titles.
I would recommend Bukowski.
Okay.
If you like this style of writing, if you like this reading about this type of person, and if you like this era, if you like all of the contemptibility that goes along with it, if you like reading about things which just bring you down.
I will say, having read this, I am more interested to read William S. Burroughs or Allen Ginsberg, which I've never really had a huge urge to read. So there is that. There's that promise. It's maybe going to turn me on to something else.
I will say this right now, though. I will not read any more Jack Kerouac. I don't think I'm. This is a look. I should have mentioned this earlier. This is a book that I never feel the need to read again. Perhaps at some point that changes, but as of right now, I have conquered On the Road, and it's done.
Yeah. I agree.
I climbed the mountain. The top wasn't so beautiful. I came back down, and I'm okay with it.
Yep.
I don't see any redeeming quality. I don't see any reread ability, any reread value. Maybe I would highlight a couple more passages, but that's it.
I agree wholeheartedly. So definitely let us know down below your thoughts on the Road by Jack Kerouac. And make sure you follow us on Facebook at StripCoverLit and on Twitter at StripCover. And hopefully try to give us some meaning behind.
Yeah, this is one where I am hoping you argue with us.